Hello, everybody. I was just giving everyone a couple of minutes to join and sorting myself out because, in the spirit of true confessions time, my computer deleted most of the final changes that I'd made to my slides. So I was just rushing to try and remedy that situation insofar as is possible. But we've got all the good stuff in there, so we'll go with that and not worry about the fact that some of the pretty bits have disappeared. So, welcome everybody who has decided to join us for B2B brand benchmarking. I'm going to share my screen and you should all be able to see what I'm going to be sharing with you today. So first things first, we're going to be going through a lot of numbers. Don't worry about having to scribble down frantically all of those numbers. We will be sharing the slides afterwards and sharing the recording. So nobody needs to be sort of foregoing their sandwich in favor of note taking. That will all be provided for you at the end. So briefly at the start, we are going to look at the branding framework that was used as the basis of this piece of work. The branding framework produced then a scorecard where we invited various B2B marketers to score themselves against the framework. And it is the sort of cumulative result of that I'm going to be sharing with you today, so you can see how what you're doing in your own organization stacks up against what your peers are doing. Right, so on with the show. Riches is the brand building framework that we use here at Genius. There are 6 parts to it, and we'll sort of step through briefly what those are so you understand some of the terminology that we're going to use later. So the first step on the road to riches is research. So this is going out to our market and confirming what are secret sources in the eyes of our clients and prospective clients and how that stacks up against the rest of our competitive landscape. Our second step is the I in riches identify, where we zone in on commercially relevant white space in the noise of the market, somewhere that we can own and develop a brand position and story to match. Then the C is all about creation, which is where people spend most of their time in brand building. So designing the visual and verbal identity that would stand for your business. H is for harmonize. So this is about going beyond the marketing department, getting teams on board with new messaging and how they go about living the brand values day to day. E stands for embed. So once you've got your awesome brand identity, making sure that it's used consistently across every possible touch point, and we'll go into a little bit of how you do that effectively later. And then the S is solidify. So once we've got our wonderful, all singing, all dancing brand identity embedded across the world, how do we actually expand and cement awareness in the target market, reinforcing that brand position so everyone knows what we stand for and why they should work with us? So to whet your appetite a little, why bother? Does it actually work? In short, yes. Each of these steps has been proven to have a measurable commercial impact. For instance, one of our clients had a plan to launch a new tech product in London, but research revealed that actually the competition in London was prohibitive, and there was an almost untapped 400 million market in Nigeria that they could go after. In the identification piece, we shifted one client's emphasis from talking about their product, where they were very similar to their competitive market, to service, where they were untouchable. And then that has in turn added 250 million to their annual sales pipeline. Creation, so creating an identity that was an exact match for what a particular group of investors would buy into, took one of our startup clients from literally an idea on some post-its to a 14 million seed funding round in just 3 days. Harmonizing, so this is the getting the rest of the business on board piece. One of our clients who used this in the very early days, they were in a loss-making position as a business and went to a sort of profitable 8 million per annum revenue just on the back of actually getting all their teams on board with their brand. The embed piece, something that a lot of people get wrong. So consistent brand presentation. One of our clients, they used to rely completely on referrals to their business for getting, and then they sort of went from that to getting leads through website and events worth in excess of £20 million. And then finally, the Solidify piece, we took one client's requirement that they had to do a 90-minute demo of their technology to a 90-second video, supported by some webinars, and help them uncover and close some really big name brands as clients, and took them through to successful 8-figure funding rounds. So this stuff works. It's not stuff that we do just for shits and giggles. It's how we actually make a difference in our businesses. So what are people actually doing? Let's take a look at the research piece. So this is about going out and talking to our market. We asked people whether they had conducted quantitative customer research, for example, a survey with more than 200 responses in the last year. Just over 20% had, and nearly 80% hadn't. The purpose of doing this is we want to identify trends from our target market. We want to prompt questions to further investigation, and we want to really understand our market in a way where we're not likely to have as much bias color things. We do obviously want to have face-to-face conversations with our market, but when we're having individual one-to-one conversations or even focus groups, we're very much at the mercy of that small number of people we've been able to gather into a room. So this is kind of a way of sanity checking some of the stuff that we will hear more detailed when we go and do our qualitative research. So, speaking of qualitative research, slightly more people had done some qualitative research, so that might be interviews or focus groups. Still, the majority haven't. So they're not doing surveys, they're not actually talking to their market. My question here is how on earth do you know what your market thinks if we're not talking to them? And when we are not talking to our market, I've written in my notes, don't be a fisherman. When somebody goes fishing, typically they will have a guess at what bait is going to catch their fish, and they will try that bait, and if it doesn't work, they swap to another bait, and then maybe to another one and another one. If that fisherman, rather than doing all this guesswork and experimentation, could have gone direct to the fish and gone, what do you want for lunch? They would be a damn sight more successful. And that is why we do the research piece. We don't wait for our audience to vote with their feet, either by, looking at which bits of our marketing are working or not, or whether they stay or leave. We actually need to go to them ahead of time and figure out what they want. And the reason for doing this on an annual basis is, as you may or may not have noticed, it's been a pretty crazy time over the last few years. Things have changed a lot and very quickly. So we need to stay current. What was true for our client base last year may not be true this year. So we've had a chat with our market, talked to them in a few different ways. What's next? Let's have a look at what the competition are up to. So later in this piece of work, there's a question around differentiation, and 55% of our respondents said they could differentiate their brand from others in their sector. Yet only 35% have actually looked at what their sector is doing. So there's a bit of a disconnect there in terms of, how do you know you can differentiate your brand if you haven't actually looked at what everyone else is doing? It's an interesting one. And the important note here is that we definitely need to be looking at what everyone else is doing so that we can do things differently, not so that we can copy what everyone else is doing. Direct competition isn't our only problem, though. We need to look at indirect competition as well. And as you can see from these numbers, even fewer people have actually looked at this. The reason for doing this is that it's not always our most obvious rivals who eat our lunch. A couple of examples from the recent past. Borders were probably watching what Waterstones were doing avidly. Were they watching Amazon? Maybe not. Ditto Blockbuster. Probably looking at every other video shop on the high street. When Netflix came knocking and said, do you want to buy us? And they laughed them out the door. So our competition isn't necessarily obviously the people who are doing the exact same thing as us. It might be people who are solving the same problem as us in a completely different way. So we must look at indirect competition as well as direct competition. And bear in mind as well that out of all the things that could cause you problems, it's never another company that's going to cause you the biggest problem. Inaction is always the number one threat. So we need to be able to use our brand position to inspire action and decisiveness. We've got lots and lots of information there. We've gone out and we've talked to our market in different ways. We've looked at our competitive landscape. So our next step is to try and bring all that together and make it something meaningful that we can use in our brand building. So that's the identify step in Riches. We asked people a few things about what they were doing in this space, starting with buyer personas. We wanted to know, have they got fully formed buyer personas for each member of their decision-making unit? And to be fair, the results weren't too bad. We got a small amount of just straight yeses, a few that yes, but they could be more detailed, and a reasonable chunk where they've got buyer personas for some members of the decision-making unit, but not for others. Only 34% hadn't got any at all and said no. So my question when I'm looking at these numbers is, well done everybody for doing your buyer personas, but given the numbers that we've just looked at in the research slides, where have those personas come from if they didn't come from research? Are they actually up to date and based on real insights, or are they just stuff that we have put together based on what we think we know? Also, something that we see a lot is detail in buyer personas that doesn't have any kind of real direct relevance to how we market to them. My favorite ones tend to be like, Kate's a marketing manager and she likes Thai food with her cat on a Friday night. And it's like, how does that help me? That doesn't help me at all. The reason that we need this stuff is because the better we know our customer, the easier it is to please them. If I asked everybody on this call now to go out and buy me a coffee, chances are most of you are going to get it wrong. You've got no idea because, there's a couple of people on the call that I know me well enough to know what I drink. But other than that, you're going to struggle. Am I a latte girl? Am I a cappuccino girl? Actually, it's black and don't mess with it. But you're not going to know that until you know me. So buyer personas are absolutely critical for building a brand position that has actually got any kind of commercial worth. Related to that is understanding why somebody buys. We asked people whether they were confident that they could speak to each of their target customers' pain points, fears, dreams, and ambitions. And why is that important? Well, in B2B, we buy something because the business needs it. We buy the specific thing that we buy because of how it makes us feel. Emotion is a critical part of B2B marketing and sales. And a lot of people gloss over this thinking like, no, it's all just about, facts and figures and proof points and case studies. That's important for sure, because that's how I make sure I'm not going to get fired for making the decision that I want to make. But the important part of that statement and my thinking on that is that I know what decision I want to make. I use all the proof points and the case studies and the logic to back up the decision that I instinctively want to make. I don't make that decision because I like a case study. I use the case study to kind of comfort my own logic brain and to make my case to the rest of the business as to why I've gone the way I've gone. I might know I need a new CRM for the business. The business needs a new CRM. I'm going to pick that CRM based on the fact that it ticks the boxes for me personally. It might make me look amazing to my team, which gives me kudos. It might solve a load of hassle and stress that I'm going through, but ultimately, I'm buying it because it makes me happy. Then we move on to value propositions. So we asked our audience how confident they were that they know what their customers value about their products and services. Unfortunately, the responses were quite long and it's cut it off the diagram, but a lot more people, 28%, said that the products were a yes, but business no. and only 6% said business yes, but products no. So we're already starting to see that people are definitely more inclined to develop value propositions for product than they are for their business. 31%, I think I know, but I'm not 100% sure. I don't really want to be going and spending masses of marketing budget on what somebody thinks they know. I want them to know they know. We've got 14% that just don't know at all, which is a little bit worrying. You know, how on earth do we sell stuff if we don't know what people value? And my little 22% of yeses up there, who I give a little high five to, because thank God they know what they're doing. If you have a product value proposition or you have a business value proposition, but you don't have the other one, it's not the end of the world, because they do have intrinsic value. But the combination of having a really strong business value proposition combined with a really strong product value proposition, that's much, much more powerful. And also, if you're in the kind of business where you need to cross-sell across products, you're making yourself much tougher for yourself if there's no perceived value in the business as opposed to just the products. We work with an information provider business where they are very, very successful at launching new product because there is an overall trust in the overarching brand. Everyone knows that brand stands for really high quality information. So if they go into a new space and provide a new type of information, it's absolutely fine, because when they go out to the market and say, right, okay, you know, we've given you information A, information B, information C, we've now got information D, there is enough trust that information D is going to be as good as A, B, C, because that's what they expect from that business. Differentiation. So this is something that I referred to earlier. 55% of our audience think they can differentiate their brand from others in the sector, but only 35% have actually bothered looking at the rest of the sector. Still a bit dodge. But differentiation is critical, because it's how we move from being a choice of one of many, many possible options to one of one. And it's also the way that we avoid fighting on price, because if you are one of many possible options and there's not really a lot to choose between you, the obvious thing to do is to go with the cheapest one. And then you end up in all sorts of pickles where your sales team are constantly having conversation about price. You're constantly there in meetings going, oh, we're too expensive, we're too expensive. You shouldn't ever be too expensive, not for the right people. But just being different isn't enough. And I thought the answers to this were particularly interesting, because we asked people whether they were confident that all their brand's differentiators were actually commercially relevant to the customer's buying decision. Only 22% said yes. 37% weren't 100% sure. Maybe. I mean, again, maybe not. I need you to be sure on this one. And 42% said outright no, they're not confident that everything that makes them different is actually commercially relevant. Difference for its own sake doesn't sell. A differentiator that has no commercial relevance is entirely pointless. If your audience does not care about a differentiator, neither should you. Now, that's not to say that everything has to be tied to commercial impact for the client. You might find that people will buy you, for instance, based on your ESG credentials. It doesn't necessarily have to be a commercial differentiator. The differentiator has to be relevant to the buying decision. It has to be able to influence that buying decision. Once we've figured all that stuff out, we need to wrap all of that up in a nice brand strategy. Unfortunately, only 35% of our respondents actually had a written brand strategy. So what? Well, if we don't know where we're going, how are we ever going to get there? Or know when we get there? Ideally, your brand strategy is at least the North Star for marketing, and ideally for the rest of the business. The other reason that you really need a brand strategy is because if you're going to invest in brand building, nobody's going to write you a check if you don't have a plan. Also, a really concrete brand strategy tends to avoid multiple personality marketing disorder, which is a phrase I have coined, from where a brand will be completely different things at different times, because we're also desperate to hit our numbers for leads and for moving people through our funnel, that we will literally do anything and say anything to make that happen, which is, as a person on the receiving end, utterly terrifying, because if I get a different experience with you every time I interact with you, I find that really unnerving and it erodes trust. Let's move on to the bit everybody loves, the create piece. So, some really encouraging results in this section. Mission, vision, and values. 68% have got them, which is good. Not great that 32% haven't. You know, it's a little bit worrying when you think that 1 in 3 marketers that responded to this are completely directionless in terms of mission, vision, and values. But I'd say overall, not a bad result. And it's really, really important, because when you go out to the rest of the business and tell them that they need to get behind the brand, this is the kind of stuff that they understand. They don't understand why you spent, 3 weeks deciding what shade of blue to be. They don't care. But this is the stuff that can get your teams really excited, to get them really galvanized around brand building. Brand story. So again, quite an encouraging result. 62% of our marketers can easily narrate their own brand story. Little bit, again, sort of close on 40% can't though. And if you don't know your own brand story, you can be damn sure nobody else does in your business. And the reason that I guess this is becoming more and more important is that people buy into these kind of authentic, appealing stories far easier than feature lists or marketing speak benefits. As our population ages and we get more and more of the, what used to be called the younger generations, who are now becoming the actual kind of buying decision makers, story is absolutely critical for, I guess as a vehicle for, conveying our difference. Now we're going to move on to personality. So not your personal personality, but does your brand have a distinctive personality and a tone of voice? Just shy of 60% said yes, 41% said no. I guess if you're wondering why this is important, I want you to have a think about your personal or professional network and think, do you have a meaningful relationship with anybody who doesn't have a personality? Or, in fact, anyone who has several? Comes back to this thing that we talked about earlier about this consistency piece. Inconsistency, it sows the seeds of distrust. And if you don't trust something, you're sure as hell not going to buy it. Visual identity. This was the best result out of all the questions we asked. We've got 78% of people saying that they've got a defined visual identity, including logo, colors, fonts, photography style, and graphic treatments. Well done, everyone else. That's great. Now, taken individually, this is a great result. It's the best result we've got in the deck. Spoiler alert. But when you take it as part of the bigger picture, it's actually kind of heartbreaking, because if we haven't done any of the other work, if we haven't talked to our market, if we haven't identified our position, if we haven't done all of that upfront work to create meaning, if we haven't even got a mission, vision, and values, this is, it's lipstick on a corpse. It's just not going to have any commercial impact whatsoever. Just being pretty doesn't sell. I sometimes relate this to dating the best looking person in town. When they agree to go out with you, you're like, yay, that's brilliant, and then you get on a date with them and realize that there is nothing below the surface. That is a pure aesthetic play, and that date number 2 ain't happening. So by all means, spend time on your visual identity, take pride in your visual identity, but it can't be all there is. It has to be a signpost for something deeper, because a signpost that doesn't point to anywhere is absolutely pointless. Then finally, in our create stage, guidelines. So we asked, is there clear, digestible, and easily accessible brand guidelines tailored to each function of the business? Now, this is usually the kicker, is that when people work with brand agencies, they go, oh yeah, I've got my brand guidelines, I've got my 62-page mega manual of everything that I ever need to know about my brand, and then they don't do anything with it. other than potentially put it on a SharePoint and hope that people are going to use it. Now, if I'm sat in the finance department or the customer service department or anywhere else, the chances of me sitting down and reading 60 pages of brand manual are basically nil. I'm not doing it. I don't know what I'm looking at. I don't know where to look for stuff. I don't understand what I'm reading. What I need is an easy, simple, one, possibly 2-page guide that shows me how the brand works for my function, the rules that apply to me personally, not, 32 different flavors of color code. And that leads us quite neatly into our harmonized step, where we're going to bring the rest of the business with us on our brand journey. So get ready for some more interesting numbers. Firstly, we talked about the leadership. So do all the leaders within your business understand what the brand's story, mission, vision, and values are? Good chunk said yes. So yeah, good. Some but not all, and 25% no. Now, why would that be a problem? Why do we need our leaders to understand this stuff? Firstly, if they're not with you, if they're not on board with this stuff, you've got a problem, because actually it's multiple problems. You've got an internal problem because you're not going to get the backing to do the brand building you want to do. You're not going to be able to bring it through the rest of the business to be truly effective. And also externally, your leadership teams are the highest profile people in your business. They're the people that other people talk to, that other people listen to the most. They're the ones that go and speak at conferences. They're the ones that do the press. If they're not on message, you are wasting a huge opportunity to build your brand. Then we move into the teams piece. So same question. Can the staff do this? Can they do the brand story, mission, vision, and values? Again, very mixed results. Not terrible, but not brilliant either. In order for you to do effective brand building, you cannot let your brand live in the marketing department. It's got to be bigger than that. And the more people who really know and understand this stuff, the better your chances of building something really powerful. What can happen if the rest of the business isn't on side with the brand and they don't understand the message and they don't understand how to embody it, is you end up with death by 1,000 cuts. It's not that anybody does anything truly devastatingly wrong, but if everybody's getting it slightly wrong all the time, you can imagine, if you're, I don't know how big each of your teams are individually, but if you've got 2 people, 10 people, even 20 people in your marketing department in a business of thousands, you've got thousands and thousands of people getting this stuff wrong, and you're the only 2, 10, 20, whatever it is that gets it right. It's a bit of an uphill slog. So what do we do about that? Team training. So have we actually trained anyone in the business on how they should embody the brand? Yes, in some cases. A few more, some but not all. Nearly half of the people that we surveyed hadn't done training with the rest of the business. So if we've done our job and we've given these nice, helpful, applicable guidelines to people, that's a good start, but it can't do it all. Even the best guidelines are going to need some help to embed this stuff in to begin with. And if you are designing team training, we tend to use the excite, inspire, inform way of doing things. So your priorities when you're training are first to get them excited about the potential, second to inspire them with the possibility, and finally inform them of what they're going to do. If you start the other way around, if you start with the rules and the what we have to do's, people switch off, they disengage, they're not going to be interested. You've got to get them excited about things, excited about doing this to begin with. You've got to inspire them with the potential that the brand, what will it mean when they're part of a really powerful brand, and then do the nasty bit where you tell them what to do. Once you've got them trained and they've all got their guidelines, we get into delegation. So once we know that people know what they need to know, we need to back off. We need to delegate responsibility. And again, 52% of people haven't bothered. Now, there's a couple of reasons why we delegate responsibility. Firstly, giving people ownership over their brand in their particular sphere, it inspires adherence to the stuff that you've just taught them. If they feel like it's theirs, then they're going to be prouder of it. They're going to be more inclined to toe the party line and to stay on brand, because it's not something you've asked them to do anymore. It's something that's theirs. And secondly, you guys as marketers, with the best will in the world, you don't know it all. You might not have the world's greatest idea as to how to bring the brand to life in the service teams or in the operations teams. Those guys know their job way better than you ever will. So let them have it. You know, as long as you're in charge of the kind of the overarching structure and the message, how they actually bring that to life can totally be up to them. And you will see much, much, much better engagement from the rest of the business if you don't go sort of full dictator on them and tell them exactly how they have to do everything. Finally, measurement. So are there measurement, monitoring and accountability places for brand compliance in all functions of the business? Again, we've got the vast majority saying no. Why do we care? Well, what gets measured gets done. So much like the brand strategy, we cannot know whether we're winning or losing if we're not measuring the stuff to begin with. Hope you're all still with me. We are going to move on to the embed piece. So this is all about consistent brand presentation across all touch points. Now, this can be really, really hard, and nobody gets it perfect. So before you start kind of, you know, donning your hair shirt and getting your flail out to beat yourself up about this, nobody gets this perfect all the time. Don't freak. What is quite useful when you come to doing this stuff is often when you do the brand creation piece, some of your, you know, your more creative team members tend to come to the fore. They've got loads of ideas and inspiration and whatever. Take them out of this piece. The quiet person who sat at the back throughout the brand creation piece going, this isn't really my scene. I'm organized, I'm logical, but I don't really do the creativity stuff. This is their bag. Bring them in, let them lead this bit. And then let them use a little model that we use that just makes it a lot easier to kind of keep tabs on everything that you've got going on. Excuse me. The model is DEEP, DEEP, and it's just a way of categorizing all the assets that you have within your brand landscape. So I'm going to step you through some of that now. So your first category on your DEEP model is digital. So that's websites, social, email, third-party listings, anything that exists in the digital sphere for your brand. Again, we've got a bit of a mixed bag of results on whether people are confident that that's working or not. It's generally the place that is hardest to deal with because there's so much of it and it's very, very hard to keep tabs on. So if you feel like you've got an inconsistency problem, map out as much as you can that you have under your D for deep. You know, try and identify all the possible places that your brand is represented. But when you go to fix stuff, always fix the highest profile stuff first. The chances of somebody tripping across, you know, a directory listing that you did back in 2016 on a website that nobody ever visits anymore, is that a problem if that's inconsistent? Well, you could argue that it is. You can argue that it isn't. If there's inconsistencies between your social media profiles and your website, for instance, that's more of a problem because people are looking at that and they are going between the two. And as mentioned before, delegate responsibility for mapping and sorting this to your logistician team members. They will do this really, really, really well. Your next category in your DEEP model is ephemeral. So this is stuff that you don't have full control of. So press, user-generated content, anything that's kind of exists and it's about your brand, but you don't have full handle on it, goes in this category. It is the hardest of all to create consistency because you've got other people coming in and they bring their own stuff to the party. If you've got one disgruntled employee that tears you apart on Glassdoor, can you do a lot about that? Not really. Can you work with your HR team, for instance, on the exit procedure to try and make sure that doesn't happen? Yes, you can. Your second E is experiential. So this means anything that is like a one-to-one human-to-human interaction, sales, customer service, even like in finance, your credit control people. The reason that it's really important that we try and get a handle on this piece is one-to-one human contact has an incredibly disproportionate impact on your brand perception. And that's because it's one of those sort of pesky emotion things that when we're having a one-to-one interaction with somebody, it's far more impactful, and we tend to take things a lot more to heart than we would if they were on a website or a social post. Finally, we've got our physical. So this is anything that you can physically touch. It might be print media, it might be events, it might be direct mail, it might be the signage outside your office. If you can actually put a hand on it, it goes in this category. To my mind, there is no real excuse for failure in this category. Consistent, it's the easiest thing to get consistent, and pretty much anything you can think of that would fall into this category is high profile. So it has to be right. And you can see from the results here that actually not necessarily the case. We've probably got a slightly better result here than in some of the other categories, but not massively. And it's desperately important. I know we all live online, but again, it's that thing of what makes most impact. Physical things have more impact than digital things as a general rule, and humans have more impact even than physical things. So we've mapped out every possible brand touchpoint we've got and made sure that they are as consistent as they can be. What next? We need guardians, not of the galaxy, brand guardians. Do people actually have defined responsible accountable persons for brand guardianship? More do than don't, but it's still a fairly even split. We really need to make sure that not only do we have these people in place, that actually we're choosing the right people. And how do you know who's a good brand guardian? 3 factors. They have the authority to enforce it, the time to enforce it, and the resources available to enforce it. So if you're making your intern into your brand guardian, you're onto hiding to nothing. It's got to be more than a label, and you want to have people outside marketing who do the role as well. So when we talked about delegating responsibility within functions, you want to be looking for somebody within that function who can be the brand guardian for that function. So for instance, your customer service team, there should be somebody in that team who's willing to wear that hat, and for it not just to be a label or a meeting they have to go to once a quarter, but it's something they're really passionate about doing. And then finally, there's the consistency piece. So do people think that all their client-facing collateral, marketing, sales, service, etc., is aligned to their brand messaging, tone of voice, and visual identity? 46% say yes. Well done them. 40% most of the time I can live with, and the 15% that say no, well, it is only 15%. It's better. Like I'm not too unhappy with this as a result, but it sort of starts to trip into what we're going to talk about next. This idea that brand is not a one-time thing. It's not a project that you start and stop. It's got to be something that is consistent over time through as many touch points as is physically possible. Because, I know we've said this a couple of times, trust builds from being predictably you. Now, predictable doesn't mean boring. I might be predictably outlandish. I might be predictably adventurous. it just means that that's what you expect from me. It doesn't mean boring. It just means that if, you know, for my personal brand, every time I go out and do something, I am a certain way. Last step, solidify. So we've done all this hard work, we've gone out, we've done the research, we've talked to our market, we've looked at our competition, we've identified the perfect piece of positioning for us. We've created an amazing identity. We've taken that right way across the business. We've embedded it across every touch point. And this is often where people start to fall off, because it's the ongoing piece. It's the stuff we have to keep doing. So we asked people, do they regularly devote time and budget to creating brand awareness and spreading their brand message? Pretty even split. It's about as close to thirds as I could expect to see on a piece like that. That needs to be 100% for anybody who's serious about building brand, because nobody cares as much as you do about you, or remembers half as well. If we don't consistently show up for people, they are never going to remember what we stand for. If we do like a one-shot deal where, you know, we create a new piece of brand positioning and we go out to market and go, hey, you know, we are this now, hooray, and then we never do it again, you can guarantee there will be no recall on that whatsoever. We have to consistently find opportunities to tell people who we are and that we are still who we were the last time they touched into our universe. Oh, got a little stray A there. Finally, final instance of at least measurement, yet again, because I'm really big on measurement. Measuring and monitoring brand awareness. Couple of reasons for doing that. The primary one is you can't justify spend without numbers. If you want to do the piece that we talked about a minute ago, the brand awareness marketing, we need to be able to prove that that is working. And it's a vicious cycle, because if we're not doing the awareness marketing, we're not building a brand. And if we're not measuring the effectiveness of that, our budget's going to get pulled and then we really can't do it. So we need to make sure that we're measuring and showing that we are making gains in order to keep that money coming so that we can keep doing the awareness marketing. More measurements. We also need to be measuring and monitoring the effectiveness of our brand messaging. Again, interesting result. Huge amounts of people not bothering. If we're not measuring this stuff, if we can't prove that what we're doing works, we're never going to get any resource to do any more of it. Also, we don't know that it's worth our time because we don't know what's working. And then finally, this final piece of measurement is, can we directly connect the impact of brand to sales? The majority can't. Some people are making a really good effort. You know, it's not watertight, but there's definitely signs of life. And only 15% really can. And for me, this is the real killer piece, because it's the piece that is really going to get you sign off on additional budget to do some of this stuff. If you can prove that who you are as a brand is helping you close more deals. If you think back to the examples that I gave you when we first stepped through that Riches framework, if you can put a number to brand building activity, nobody is ever going to fight you on the time or the money you spend on it. And if you take nothing else away from this entire session, take that. If you can prove your brand is making you money, nobody will fight you on doing more to build it. Cool. So just before we wrap up, I just wanted to have a little look at, this is the overall scores and how they break out per category of the framework, because I think it's kind of an interesting visual to understand where most people are getting stuff right and where most people are getting stuff wrong. Now, quick explanation of the color codes. There was a explanation of this on the original slide before it decided to die. Anything that is this kind of pinky purple color is a poor performance. Anything that is purple is an average performance, and anything that is green is a good performance. So you can see, based on the way that those colors break out, much more people do well on the creation step. They put loads and loads of time and effort into, mission, vision, and values, verbal identity, visual identity, really nailing that piece. Where people have really fallen down, we've got so few people who have done anything with that. They've done all the hard work of doing an amazing job creating an identity, and then they don't promote it. They don't put the effort in over the long term to make sure that that bears fruit. Similarly, our proportion of very good people in the research stage is very small. And the proportion of people who scored very badly in research is very large. If we're not going out and talking to our market, if we're not doing the hard yards, figuring out what it is that makes us different, what it is that our customers care about, everything else becomes incredibly difficult, because we are building a house on sand. Now, I've said this at the start, I will just recap very briefly. Don't worry about writing down numbers. All of this will be supplied to you via email, as will the recording, in case you need to go back over things, because I am aware that I talk far too fast a lot of the time. What you do next is up to you, but I would suggest that anybody who hasn't, and I know a few people on this call already have, so don't worry, I'm not asking you to do it again, but anyone who hasn't, get your phone out, scan the QR code, or use the little link there. That will take you to the same scoring tool that was used to generate the results in this presentation. You will be able to fill in your own answers. You will get your own scores back, and you will also get a 10-page report tailored to the scores that you have got, that will give you just additional information on how to work through this stuff, what kinds of things that you need to be doing and focusing on based on your score. It's free. We're not going to phone you up just because you did it. However, I do want to say that anybody who is on the call or has done this, who wants to talk about their results specifically and wants to really understand more about the framework and how they should use it, I am absolutely up for having those calls with you and to helping you with this stuff, because it's the thing that lights me up. It's the thing that I believe in most of all at work. It's my reason for being, is building really great brands. And if that means spending time with you guys, helping you to do this stuff, please just reach out, either on LinkedIn, or I think you've probably all got my email from signing up to this. Just let me know how I can help you with this, because I'm absolutely, completely desperate to make that happen for you. Okay, so thank you so much, all of you, for listening, and I'm going to give you an extra 9 minutes back in your day, unless you've got any questions. If you have got any questions, hang about and ask them, and otherwise I wish you a very happy Friday and a brilliant weekend.